Welcome back to the Age of Asparagus and our show where Bob Ross is helping us learn how to use Krita. Wouldn't it be convenient if all our brushes just showed up in this pop-up so we didn't have to dig through the presets every time? We can do that. I have the Blender soft brush created, and every time I switch between the brushes it goes back to its default size, and this is our 2-inch blending brush, so I want it to save 2 inches or 200 pixels. With our DVAD D4 Blender soft brush selected, let's go up into this scary brush engines window. Now this looks really complicated and is very intimidating at first. And throughout this course, we're going to slowly go through several of these different brush engines and create our own brushes to get the exact, or as close as we can, to the effect that we want. In this case, we're pretty much just going to use this exact same brush. We just want to save it with our own name and a different size. Now before we save it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this section over here. This is a section here where you can preview what your brush looks like as you change the settings. Now this is a smudge brush and there's only white on here, so it's not smudging anything, it's just smudging the white on itself. But I can hit this gradient button down here and it'll give me a nice gradient to better see the effect of my brush. In this case, you can see that here. Now this white square, this is the little section where the icon will come from. So if we saved this now, the icon for this brush would be this gray smudgy thing. Instead, what I want to do is I'm going to hit this button here and it will reload whatever icon this brush had originally. And since this brush started out as the DVAD Blender Soft, it's going to pull its icon. You can use this icon, you can create your own, whatever you like. Last thing I want to do before I save it is I'm going to change the diameter of our brush to exactly 200. I can do that by clicking on here. You can click on the bar and drag them. You can use the up and down arrows, or once you click on the bar you can just type 200 and enter, get the exact number. That's pretty good. That's all I want. I'm going to hit Save to Presets and rename it BR. I'm going to start the name of all the brushes we create with BR, Bob Ross, to make them easier to find. And we'll call this our 2-inch blender. And that's all we need for this. I notice it appeared right there. Next we want to create that cloud brush. So let's go back. We'll find the stamp. There's the DVAD B1 sponge stamps. Make sure it's selected. And we'll go back up into that brush engines window. Let's reload the icon for it. Under size, we want this to be our 1-inch cloud brush. So I'm going to hit that, type in 100, and hit enter. I've got my size at 100, I've got the icon, that's good, and I'm going to save to presets. And let's rename it BR Cloud Brush. That's great, but how do I get them to show up on my pop-up palette here? The brushes in the pop-up are selected based on the tag you choose here. If I choose ink, it's going to show a bunch of ink brushes. If I show block, it'll show a bunch of block brushes. What we need is we need to create a BR, Bob Ross tag, so we can have all of our Bob Ross brushes and we don't have to keep fiddling around with the presets docker. To do that, let's go to our Bob Ross brushes. So in the text search field here, I'm going to type in BR space, and that pulls up our 2 brushes. So with our 2-inch blender, let's hit new tag. I'm going to call it Bob Ross. And currently you can see there are no brushes with the Bob Ross tag. These are all our tags. And it should show up in our presets docker Bob Ross with no brushes. So let's go add the Bob Ross tag to our brushes we created. I'm going to type in BR and space to get our brushes. Now I'm going to right click, or on the equivalent right click on your pen, which I'm using, and I'm going to assign to tag, assign to Bob Ross. And same with this one. assign to tag, Bob Ross. And you'll notice these brushes now appear in our pop-up palette under the Bob Ross tag. Before we get started on our lake, let's make a new layer for the lake. So let's switch over to the Layers tab. You can see we have a background layer, and we can click the little eyeball here to make it disappear. That's our white canvas in the background. We have our clouds layer, and we want to make a new layer for our lake. So down at the bottom here, this little plus, you can just click that. It'll create a new paint layer, and I'm going to double click it, or you can hit F2 on the keyboard, and we're going to call this one Lake. Make sure that one's selected in blue, and we can get started. In most other cases, we're going to be creating brushes much more similar to the physical real-life brushes that Bob Ross is using. But in this case, I'm just going to use our 1-inch sponge brush, our 1-inch cloud brush, and quickly fill in some blue for our water. You can fill it in solid on either side here and leave some white in the middle. And when we get to blending it in, we'll get those nice streaks. I'm going to zoom in and position down closer. And then we'll brush some in here. Now let's switch to our 2-inch smudge brush, and here we're going to blur this layer out. And if you've put in a little too much blue like I have, then you can smudge from the white and smudge it back out. And the amount of white you bring in will be proportional to your pressure. Bob Ross joined the U.S. Air Force when he was 18. When he was posted to Alaska, he first saw the snow and mountains that later became recurring themes in his artwork. Having held military positions that required him to be, in his own words, mean and tough, the guy who makes you scrub the latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work, Ross decided that if he ever left the military, he would never scream again. While staying in Alaska, Bobby was working as a part-time bartender when he discovered a TV show called The Magic of Oil Painting, hosted by German painter Bill Alexander. He studied with Alexander and afterwards discovered that he was able to earn more from selling his artwork than he was in his job with the Air Force. He retired from the Air Force after 20 years of service with the rank of Master Sergeant. That looks good for now. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you back for the next show.